published literature example for Module 7.1.2. This is going to be the quality of care service utilization illustrations. Steve Parenti here, University of Minnesota, Carlson School of Management for the Healthcare Analytics class. So let's go to our course website to find this published literature example. Go into Modules on Canvas, and we're going to scroll in and find week 7. We actually have 2 articles to take a look at. One is a JAMA article that came out around the same time as the article that was published as I take for review articles. This is really the quality of care complement to it. I'm kind of really happy the way this article turned out. I was the second author. I did this when I was getting my PhD at Johns Hopkins. I did most of the analysis for this, and Jonathan, who was a mentor to me and also one of the developers, actually lead developer of ACGs at Hopkins, was very kind because Jonathan had his decade or so of experience being a really great academic. And we worked together really well as a team saying, hey, what if we did this? And so I wrote up a draft, and John said, nice draft. How about if I take this to a better journal and edit it a little bit? And he really shepherded this thing all the way through. It was wonderful collaboration. And then with the other team from Brandeis University, Deb Garnick, Jeanette Valls from Park Nicollet Medical Foundation, Ann Lauders and Heather Palmer from Harvard. So what are we doing in this article? Basically, we are using Medicare claims data, again, to pretend that it's a managed care type of organization, really ahead of its time. We used data from the different Medicare populations. We had Alabama, Iowa, and Maryland. We then looked at what people were doing in terms of their diabetes. And we had a whole range of conditions to look at. Actually, a lot of the data that you get to see for, if you took the Millie 65-62 class, the Garnick article really comes out of this. This is probably the most highly cited work that we did. We have well over 1,000 sites for this. When I went up for tenure at the University of Minnesota, this was the leading article people commented on in terms of a level of effort and the impact it had. So about that effort. Get into this a little bit further. This chart shows basic stuff here before it. Just look familiar to you. Number of patients, their ages, their illness burden. So that's familiar to some of the things that we looked at when we did our risk adjustment piece. Where things get a little more interesting is down below here. When we look at, for the states, the let's zoom a little bit in here so you can see it better. Well, that's a little too much. Well, maybe not. There we go. That was interesting. So recommended use. If you did Garnick, you see this, but this is really where it showed up in JAMA in an interesting way. We basically looked at how many folks were getting hemoglobin A1C if they had diabetes, and this is clearly something you should be doing. So for an eye exam, a lot of people were doing that. Cholesterol, a lot of people were doing that. Some blood glucose, some were doing that. But in terms of the hemoglobin A1C, it was a very small percentage, and it was kind of almost political to say, you know, the general practice docs, the traditional old school docs, weren't doing it very much. Internal medicine doing it more, but actually family practice was doing it even greater. So that, even at the margin, just saying family practice outperformed internal medicine can be war amongst the medical community. This article actually served as sort of a huge conversation about that this needs to go up, and within 2 to 3 years of us publishing this, the hemoglobin A1C rates literally tripled in the country. So that was a great outcome. So this is one of the articles that's motivating what you're going to be doing for this paper. And then you can see how the different summary pieces there. We really didn't shy away from looking at some of the regression pieces of this. We just wanted to we figured it was more powerful to talk about just the results in terms of just the raw numbers. But take a look at read it if you have a chance. I actually really heavily suggest you read it because it talks about how you can present multivariate analysis with just a few tables. This is a little bit longer than what your health affairs goal will be, but it's, you know, you think about three tables tells a lot of the story. So this isn't the only paper for this week. Let's go back to, let's see if it's under files here. I guess that's not quite where I wanted to go. I feel like I just went to the back lot of the Canvas setup here. Okay, back to modules. And down to week 7. Okay, health fairs article. So this is a slightly different article, one that I published with a colleague of mine, Joanne Spetz, and Bob Town, now at UT Austin. Dawn Mazurko, so if you United might know her. She is a VP there, and also one of the first doctor of nurse practitioners in the state. So this article actually looks at the issue about whether retail clinics do things better than others. We had data actually from an insurance company to do this. The reason why I pointed is several reasons. One is that you can actually look at like just doing data analysis over years. Remember, you have 14 and 15 data. That could be useful for your health affairs article. But this also sort of points out a little bit of some of the variables that are being used here that weren't necessarily used before. So for example, actually ADGs are in here, so that's kind of intriguing. But we also have ER use, hospitalization variables as well. And then more importantly, how we actually use some of this information to look at, you know, just different types of regression models, so OLS, ordinary least squares, just to explain, you know, what might be influencing. In this case, we looked at whether retail clinics had an impact on payments, as well as hospitalizations, and generally the statistics were great for retail clinics. This is one of this is a nice paper, very highly cited, that came out in 2013, and a great collaboration between academics and industry. Joanne is one of the Workforce Center deputy directors at the University of California, San Francisco, and Bob Town and I originally did this as a consulting project with Dawn, and then we kind of, when we realized that there was something more than just retail clinics that relate to scope of practice laws, meaning how much nurse practitioners can do, we thought this could be much more interesting if we can actually measure how scope of practice could be affecting the effectiveness of retail clinics, which it clearly was. So these are just a few articles that give some, if you will, some illustrations about how these metrics can be used that are done in the real world. This one's a little more contemporary than some of the older stuff I've been showing you. But I mean, if you just were to Google on claims data and healthcare quality, you'll find a lot of articles, particularly if you just do that in Google Scholar. But this gives you a good flavor for how this work is done. This concludes this module on published literature example for Module 7, our healthcare use and quality metric analysis.